to the Gentiles and creates a new people out of the Gentiles, a new church out of the Gentiles. They perform as they should. They finally create the church that he has wanted on earth. He raptures his church. And then the last days progress. The last days are marked by tribulations, by the Antichrist. And then finally what ends up happening in the end is after Satan is bound, historically speaking, after the big war, Armageddon is subsided and concluded, God turns to his people, and the vast majority of Jews finally accept Christ. They finally come to Christ, right? They finally come to Christ. This is where this is going, right? Now, you can recognize immediately how, and this is why if you're in conflict, I'm a conflict resolutionist by profession, but a philosopher by training. As a conflict resolutionist, if I'm going to try to mitigate conflict, specifically religious conflict, you can imagine that, and this is not knocking Christians, right, or Christian believers, but you can imagine how a line like number 5, bottom of page 2, might infuriate some people within the Judaic community, right? All of this war, all of this destruction is so that we finally come to Christ. We've denied Christ. You say, conceptually speaking, that Christ turns his attention to the Gentiles, and then after all these millions of billions of people are killed, now we are eventually going to come to Christ. Don't we have a say in this? Aren't we? So there is room to discuss, right? If you really think about the complexity of this discussion, there's room to understand possibly, and I'm not going to be doing the conflict resolution on this, because I'm not motivated. Really, the only thing I'm motivated by is just getting information out. Once the information is out there, I'll let you decide what you want to do with the information. It's not up to me to determine what and how this information is applied, but the idea is what a great resource you can get information on eschatology from not only the 3 main monotheistic, but I'll also be doing polytheistic and agnostic discourses on the end times, right? So number 5, and then finally number 6, during the millennial age, the resurrected saints will rule the world, right? This is out of the author's, this is a direct citation from the author, so that the saints come back, and obviously they're resurrected, the saints, and they rule the world with their Lord. Peace and prosperity will come to earth, and worship will center on the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, right? The temple in Jerusalem, which again, I told you I wasn't going to talk about the church. I'm not. Even for me, some topics I don't address at all because they're just too heavy topics. I'll let other people do that discourse. I can't be the be all end all for all information. Some information you're gonna have to look up for yourself. But obviously, in order for it to center around a church, it would have to have been rebuilt. And the question is, when is this going to occur? When is the building of this church in Jerusalem going to occur? Where is this church? What's the significance of this church? And so on and so on and so on. Right? So the idea is at the end, when this is all said and done, God turns his gaze back to his original people, the Jews, and eventually, after all of this, the vast majority of them. And I think there was a section when most of Israel will be converted, right? There's a sense in which most of Israel will be converted to Christ. Now, in fairness, right, and this isn't to challenge people's religious beliefs, but in fairness, for those of religious clerics who understand the text, a few questions arise, all right? And I think that it's imperative that, first, if the story as accounted here in this lecture, and the narrative, and in the text, this Oxford Handbook of Eschatology, a few questions arise, and I think it requires, I'm not going to answer the question, right, because I don't have the training to answer the question. So I always encourage people to participate. Send me a text, or not a text, send me a message. It doesn't have to be anything lengthy. But one, when it's said in the text that most of Israel will convert to Christ and will come to accept Christ, what happens to the other? Was that a typo on the author's part? I don't think it was, right? But so it's not all of Israel is going to be converted to Christ. It's going to be most of Israel. Well, what happens to those who don't? Not only what happens to those who don't, but we're talking about, we're now post-millennial. We're no longer pre-millennial, right? We're post-millennial, meaning that Armageddon's already transpired, Satan has already been bound. So historically speaking, how do we make sense of that, right? And I know various traditions have different stories. I know Latter-day Saints have a different story from Jehovah's Witnesses. Pentecostals have a different narrative. So I guess the narrative differs depending on the belief system. But the idea is, what would an average individual, an average human being look like once the second coming has transpired? Once the kingdom is actually established on earth, what is that narrative? Right? What is that narrative? Because the grand story sort of ends there. Is it up to us then to determine what that narrative looks like? Is everyone Christian? Does everyone accept Christ? It says that, you know, Christ and the saints will be ruling, but how will that rule manifest? Right? So there's a lot of questions that are open, and I really encourage you know, people in seminary, people who are theological clergy, to participate in the discussion, because it's not like you know, to say that it's off limits and I'm not going to discuss that, it's not intellectually gratifying, right? So the question is, what does it look like? What is the narrative after? What is the narrative post-millennial? I get the narrative premillennial, but I don't know, and this is just probably my ignorance, I don't know what that narrative is post-millennial. So since I'm still in the development phase of the lecture series, if you have post-millennial narrative, please send me the links. I'll do some reading. I'll have resources. I'll be able to get more information, and then I can contribute some of that narrative, if it exists, to the lecture series, right? So this is an opportunity for you to give me the resources I need while I'm preparing. I'm in the process, and I'll be in the process of developing this lecture series for maybe the next month. So please send me the information. Specifically, I'm looking for post-millennial, post-second coming, after the arrival. What does that condition of affairs look like? What does it look like? Right? I know Jehovah's Witnesses have a pretty descriptive account, so if you're Jehovah's Witness and you want to send me some stuff, I'll read the material and try my best to incorporate that perspective into this lecture series, because I want the lecture series to be as general and as broad and as all-encompassing as possible. I don't want to specifically just talk about one particular belief, Protestant, Christian. I want to talk on many different beliefs and many different segments of beliefs within the Christian tradition and such. So, with that being said, that concludes section 1.0 of my series into eschatology and the sort of conceptual understanding of what eschatology is and how it manifests and unfolds. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Have a good day.